The events that unfolded on the Mount of Transfiguration represent the ultimate conclusion of a 4,000-year theological system. To see this system at work, we look to the physical landscape of ancient Israel, specifically the high elevation of Mount Tabor. Here, the historical record describes a bright, luminous cloud descending from the open sky, physically enveloping the figures standing on the mountain. From within the concealment of that overshadowing vapor, a distinct, unseen voice issued a direct command to the men below. Matthew chapter 17, verse 5 states, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him." That final instruction, "Hear ye him," acts as an absolute, imperative command handed down from a higher authority. This appearance on the mountaintop follows a pattern established over 4 millennia. Anciently, this specific phenomenon, the presence of God concealed within a cloud, is known as the Shekinah. The Shekinah functions as the physical covering surrounding the divine presence in the mortal sphere. Understanding the specific mechanics of the Shekinah reveals how the ministry of the mortal Messiah changed the relationship between God and man. This diagram breaks the Transfiguration down into 3 historically recurring variables: the mountain, the cloud, and the voice. If we isolate the voice and examine the specific declaration made from the cloud, a distinct ancient scriptural precedent emerges. As recorded in Psalms chapter 2, verse 7, "Thou art my son, this day have I begotten me." That Old Testament text, written centuries earlier, perfectly mirrors the exact phrasing delivered from the cloud at the Transfiguration. To understand why God deployed these exact variables to introduce Jesus, we have to trace their operational history backward through time. We find the Shekinah in its most institutionalized form within the ancient Israelite temple system. At the very center of the temple sat the Holy of Holies, an architectural space designated as the earthly resting place for the divine presence. Inside this room, the physical figures of the cherubim framed a dedicated central void for the Lord to inhabit. Here, the thick cloud of the Shekinah served a highly specific purpose. It acted as a necessary shield to protect mortal man from the unfiltered, lethal glory of deity. This cross-section illustrates the internal dynamics. When the voice of God spoke to Israel, it projected outward from the cloud between the cherubim. This arrangement was the required relationship between God and a mortal world. The barrier layer absorbed the radiant core's intensity. Whenever God needed to communicate directly with humanity, this specific covering system was deployed to facilitate safe interaction. The Shekinah was a functional mechanism for safe mortal and divine interaction. This functional system extended far beyond the stationary temple, operating in rugged, isolated locations when God manifested to chosen individuals. We see the earliest major data point in the record of the prophet Enoch. In Moses chapter 7, verses 1 through 4, Enoch is commanded to "get ye upon the Mount Simeon, where he beholds the heavens open, is clothed upon with glory, and saw the Lord." Enoch's ascent establishes a strict prerequisite. High elevation is required to access the open heavens and receive glory. This pattern repeats with the second major data point, the prophet Moses on Sinai. For 40 days he remained completely isolated amidst terrifying thunders, lightnings, and fires at the peak of the mountain. Surrounded by this intense manifestation of the Shekinah, Moses received the foundational holy law. That law emerged directly from the protective covering, physically written onto tables of stone by the finger of God. The third data point shifts the precedent away from Old Testament geography entirely, focusing on Morian Kumer. According to Ether chapter 2, Morian Kumer talked with the Lord for 3 hours, and the voice came out of the cloud. The historical pattern holds firm regardless of era or location. The power and glory of the Almighty remained shielded by the cloud, while the voice pointed the way from within. If we bring these ancient precedents back to the New Testament timeline, the events on the Mount of Transfiguration take on a different weight. After 4,000 years of anticipation, the hour of atonement had arrived, requiring a ransom to be paid by one completely without sin. At this specific moment in history, the historical function of the Shekinah was deliberately reversed. Instead of deploying to conceal the divine presence, the bright cloud shielding the personage from men began to lift. With the veil removed, the promised Messiah was fully revealed as the mortal Messiah. This removal caused a permanent shift in how divine truth would be transmitted to humanity going forward. The apostle announced in Hebrews, "God who spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son." The ancient system mediated through a dark cloud was superseded by the physical presence of the Son. God's voice was no longer separated by a protective barrier. It was embodied in a living personage standing on the earth. This brings us to the theological implication of the Mount, the absolute, unbroken unity between the Father and the Son. The words spoken by Jesus during his mortal ministry were not his own creations, but originated directly from the Father. Jesus explained in John chapter 7, "My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine." Seeing God clearly requires understanding that the Son reflects the Father. This culminates in the divine pronouncement found in John chapter 14, verse 9. "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father." When the Father spoke from the cloud for the final time, he did not deliver a new law. He issued a singular, eternal redirection of humanity's focus. The purpose of the Shekinah's return was to point all men to the mortal Messiah, with one definitive directive: "Hear ye him."